the subject for this video is going to be stepping out of your comfort zone, because today I've come to the beach and I've come at sunset. Welcome to St Bees, which is a beach on the west coast of England, on the Cumbrian west coast. And I thought I'd come down and try my hand at some seascape photography. I don't do an awful lot, and I certainly don't do a lot here. Most of my seascape photography is done in Cornwall, where my mum lives. And I've only ever been here once before, which was a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't really get on very well. I didn't really like the shots that I got, so I'd come back today. I think the problem was that I'd come at sunrise, which is typically when I like to shoot. But of course, on the west coast, the sun is rising from inland. So I've come back today at sunset to see if I fare any better, and unfortunately, as you can see, it's very, very blue skies. So the light is very, very harsh, but we do stand a good chance when that sun does set of getting a nice bit of glow. As with any form of outdoor photography, the conditions are so important for seascapes. And it's not just the light we have to worry about, but also the tide height. So it is now about 6:30 in the afternoon, early evening, and low tide was at 4:30. So this means we've got a rising tide. And that means that the beach that I'm on is very messy. What you want really is a falling tide, and that cleans the beach as it goes out and leaves, lovely patterns and what have you. But unfortunately at the minute, all we've got are a load of old footprints. I know that we landscape photographers are always moaning about the light, but it's insanely bright here this evening. It's that kind of brightness that you only ever get on the coast. It's super, super bright. But the great thing about shooting at sunset is that you're building up to a climax, so you've got plenty of time to find a composition for when the sun sets. Now when the sun sets, it's actually going to head down behind St Bees Head, and so we should start getting some shadow and some usable light well before the sun has actually set. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to head off and see if I can find a composition for later on. One of the things that you should always do if you're working in an environment that you're not entirely comfortable, somewhere that you're not used to working, I think is stick to your strengths. And as you come up the beach here, there is an area where there's a load of rocks. So I think you know what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of picking out a couple of these rocks to use as foreground interest and shoot across them and have St Bees Head in the background. Now, the high tide is about an hour after sunset. It's about 10 o'clock, sunset's at 9. And so how far up the beach the tide is going to be by the time the sun sets, I just don't know. So that's going to be a little bit of jeopardy. But before we worry about that, I have got another shot in mind. Here at the very top of the beach is this area of these beautiful pebbles, and I'm thinking of taking an abstract shot, an intimate shot, just focusing in on the pebbles. So what I'm going to do now is look for a nice, attractive area, and then I'm going to get the camera out and just pick out the detail. Now, normally I wouldn't try this shot in this type of light. I would normally only go for something like this when it's overcast. But we have got a bit of side light that is creating some shadows. So that might add something to the shot, or it might ruin it, I guess. We'll just have to see. I think probably the most important thing that you need to think about when you're working on the coast is that tide. You don't want to be caught out by the sea. And while I was rummaging around trying to find a composition over there in the pebbles, I looked round and the level of the water has risen really high, much quicker than I was expecting. So I'm now going to retreat back above the edge of these pebbles, and we're going to look at some of the groins and see if they can act as a bit of foreground for this shot back towards St Bees Head. The sea's coming up way further than I was expecting by this time, and we're still a good 2 hours away from high tide. I've been joined by my mate John Kemp. Those of you that join me for my webinar every month will know John. He's a local, and it was him that showed me this beach in the first place, so it's good to have him back. He's trying some long exposures and stuff like that. I've picked out some of these old groins here, and I've got a shot set up. Can't really see what I'm doing at the moment because I'm shooting into the sun, but as that sun eventually dips down behind St Bees Head, I should get a better idea of whether this composition is going to work. So this is the shot that I've got lined up. I've just picked out a single one of the groin posts. There are no boards between them here, they've been knocked off. So I've just picked out a single one, and the one that I picked out has been worn away at the bottom by these pebbles being moved out, so it kind of creates quite an interesting shape. And I've positioned the camera quite low so that the post breaks the horizon, and it kind of creates this sort of cross with the headland. Now, whether that is actually going to work or not, at this stage I'm not really sure, and I'm not going to know until the sun has gone down behind the headland, because I really can't see anything on the back of the camera at this stage. So it's just going to be a bit of a waiting game. So that sun has pretty much gone down below the headland now, and we are completely in shade. And that does mean that I can at least now see my composition properly on the back of the screen. And I've made a few adjustments. I've moved the top of the headland so that it's sitting on the top third. And that allows me to include a lot more of these pebbles in the foreground, which I think looks pretty good. The one difficulty that I've got now, obviously, is I still got this enormous dynamic range, so I think I'm going to have to bracket. But I also think there's another composition here, and John was just trying it. I might have a look at that in a minute, and that might be a long exposure. Right, sorry about that. That all got a little bit frantic towards the end. As expected, it was just the dynamic range was just too much in that direction. So simply all I did was I just turned round and did a very similar shot, a lot simpler. Obviously you haven't got the headland in the background, but because the light was coming from that side, dynamic range was much better, and I was able to do a few long exposures, and basically I was just doing a shot of the groins running into the sea. And I think I'm going to be pretty pleased with them. They look okay to me. I think for the first time here at sunset, you know, I think it's going to be an okay shot. So there you go, that was sunset at the beach. Very different from what I would normally do, but I've really enjoyed myself this evening, and I think I definitely want to do more seascapes in future, and I definitely want to do more sunset shoots in future. It's been very exciting. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please do give it a thumbs up, and hopefully you'll tune in next week when I shall probably be back in the Lake District.